I want to just first welcome everyone to the 2022 iEar Salon, which is a virtual series exploring what we've called sensibilities and environmental bodies. And it's curated by us in the Arts Graduate Colloquium here at RPI. This series engages with the topics of deep ecology, alternative ways of knowing, and new figurations for being in place. My name is Allie Wist. I'm an interdisciplinary artist originally from Pittsburgh, actually a small steel town north of Pittsburgh. And I'm currently living in Troy, New York, and I am the curator of our talk today with Timothy Morton. We are currently broadcasting from RPI's arts department. The program is curated as a whole by myself and the other students, Hane Utamura, Nina Isabel, John Santomaeri, and Arma Yari. The program is part of iEar Presents, which is curated by Professors Kathy High and Brandon Miller. And it's sponsored by the School of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences at RPI and made possible by the New York State Council of the Arts with support of the New York State Legislature. So we will have more artists speaking the following 3 Wednesdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Really incredible set of artists. So please go back to the Eventbrite page and register for all those too. Today we are just beside ourselves and very thrilled to have Timothy Morton with us, joining from their office. And I'm going to share a brief biography, but we will have the full biography in the chat to take a look at. So Timothy Morton is the Rita Shea Guffey Chair in English at Rice University and the director of the Cool America Foundation. They have collaborated with artists such as Laurie Anderson, Jennifer Walshe, Olafur Eliasson, Justin Guariglia, many others. And again, check out the chat for the full list. Morton co-wrote and appears in Living in the Future's Past, which is a 2018 film about global warming with Jeff Bridges. And they are the author of the libretto for the opera Time, Time, Time by Jennifer Walshe. They have an incredible list of books that they have published, including All Art is Ecological, Being Ecological, Dark Ecology, Hyper Objects, Realist Magic, The Ecological Thought, the list goes on. They also have a Patreon that you can follow for podcasts, which I personally love. I myself am a close follower of Morton's writing and have heard them described as an eco-philosopher, a writer, a curator. I think in one talk, you described yourself as someone who knows how to read poems, which I definitely appreciated. And I think labels are a bit hard to pin down with the nature of their work, which is also a theme of their work. So I think that without too much more further ado, I will pass it off to Timothy, and thank you so much for being here today.
Gosh, thank you very much for that very, very lovely introduction. And like I say, this is the first time I've ever done a Zoom lecture in my office. And to be absolutely honest with you, I really like it. Usually I'm standing in my kitchen and there's a nice little Juan Miró poster behind me that says, you know, Aid Spain and all that. And it's quite nice. But, you know, standing up, it's overrated, isn't it? Sort of chairs are bad, but sitting in one suddenly feels really good. And I've got this wall behind me at an angle. So look, I'm all clever because I got books, and I'm cool because I got posters. It's what's not to like about that? Finally, you know, it's lovely to see you. And this thing here will tell me what I'm supposed to say to you. And actually, I had a dilemma as to what to say to you that I've just resolved. Because right after I talk with you and look at people's art and stuff, I'm talking to this outfit in Britain called Just Stop Oil. And as you know, they will have done. They'll probably be thinking about the action that happened a few days ago. If you probably know, right? Like 2 people got into the National Gallery with a can of tomato soup, and their name wasn't Andy Warhol, and they poured it all over Van Gogh's sunflowers, and everybody went, "Whoa, what's that?" And I went, "Whoa, what's that?" And then just this morning, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. I figured it out what it was. And so I'd like to share it with you a little bit, what that was. But the actual title of this lecture, I now notice, is the rise of Darth Vader. Darth Vader. Yeah, because I'm writing this book. It's called Hell on Earth. And I've always wanted to write a book about William Blake. Let me just check the audio. You guys can hear me, right? Roughly. Can I increase the input at all? Usually I might speak quite quietly. Let me just increase the mic input a little bit. Okay. So I'm writing this book. It's called Hell on Earth, and it's basically the book I've always wanted to write, sort of about William Blake, you know, since I was 19 years old, and I read a lot of Blake stuff. But the trouble with me writing a book about Blake is I would just be like holding open an edition of Blake going, look at this, it's amazing. It wouldn't really be a book about William Blake. It would just be a whole bunch of quotations with some indicator arrows saying, isn't this great? And that didn't seem like a book to me. So then I decided I could write this with William Blake, which sounds pretentious, and it probably is, but hopefully it sort of isn't. And it's a little bit like, and again, this also sounds pretentious, but it's sort of like what Tom Stoppard did to Dark Side of the Moon. You know, if you haven't had the pleasure of listening to his radio play Dark Side, then it's highly recommended to go on YouTube and have a listen. The reason why, so you know the dark side of the rainbow, right? Where you take the dark side of the moon and you sort of mash it up with the Wizard of Oz, right? Imagine a mashup, only the thing you mash it up with is a play by Tom Stoppard that's actually been written specially to be mashed up with Dark Side of the Moon. That's kind of amazing, right? And what Stoppard does there is he actually turns up the volume on an implicitly ecological thread in that album, and so turns it up and pushes it so that you can't not hear it. And it's like a sort of a deeply moving thing for me that he's done that. And a little bit that's what I'm doing with Blake, right? I'm taking an implicitly ecological theme that he's working with. You know, you see these things in his work, right? You see things like the Proverbs of Hell from the Marriage of Heaven and Hell, where he says all wholesome food is caught without a net or a trap. And also this line, bring out number, weight, and measure in a year of dearth, right? And then you think to yourself, but he wasn't really an ecological artist because he's all about nature is bad, right? And he uses nature as a symbol for kind of ideological oppression, but actually he's spot on there, because that's how I use the term nature. And if I'm right, then Blake must be right. That came out really, really wrong. Sorry for saying it that way, and thank you for not laughing about it. And I can't even see if people are laughing because I can just see mostly people's faces. So yeah, that's gone wrong. Writing this book with William Blake, okay, the point about nature is that it's what we would call scientism as opposed to science. Yeah, that's the other thing about Blake. He's not hostile to ecology, but he's also not hostile to science, not at all. You know, what he's hostile to is the ideological weaponization of science, which we call scientism, which is actually a kind of a religion of science. It's almost the inverse of science. But the problem is a lot of scientists have been educated to be scientistic, right? And so they miss a whole bunch of things because they're still working with the current state of whatever crap is in the record store that we don't examine in our heads, right? Like active versus passive, masculine versus feminine, subject versus object, all these really old tweets from people like Aristotle. You know, if you don't like the idea of master versus slave, then you might not like you might want to do something about the idea of subject versus object, because subject versus object duality is always a master versus slave duality, as my friend Denise has pointed out, Denise Ferreira da Silva, in a book called Towards a Global Idea of Race. And I think all these other binaries also map onto that, right? Active and passive and masculine and feminine, and right. So if you don't like that, and if you don't like the teleological way in which someone like Aristotle, and in general, you know, white Western philosophy sort of carves up the world to make everything have a kind of point to it. If you don't like that, and you think that's kind of like one of the philosophical public enemy number one or number two, you know, then you might want to, again, investigate these terms and sort of have a think about not using them and sort of doing something different, right? That's very, very important right now, because we've actually got to achieve some kind of planet scale magnitude of political awareness and action to deal with what's happening right now. Yeah, that actually within the next 3 years, 1.5 will be irreversible, and we will probably go above it. And you know, 1.5 is bad right now. We're now at 1 global warming, yeah, centigrade. You roughly double it. It's Fahrenheit, you know, roughly. I can't remember all the multiplying and subtracting and stuff like that, but basically just say, look, we're up 2 degrees now. We really don't want to go up to 5. We really don't, you know. Yeah, my daughter came into my kitchen in November crying. You know, it's very unusual that she wanted to come and stay that evening. She usually have it very well sorted out, and she's quite into the patterns, right? But she was very, very, very upset, and she said, Daddy, we're in hell. And she really meant it, you know, she's crying, yeah. I sort of thought, oh, wow, okay, dad skills, 11 p.m. dad skills. Okay, what are we going to do? And she's looked at Reddit, right? And she's looked at YouTube. And unfortunately, the left-wing information on a lot of those websites is conveyed in the key of accidentally cynical reason, right? Because the most cynical person gets to be the ruler of that domain, whether or not they're in charge of it, right? And so there's a bad side effect of some of what you're seeing there, because you're seeing, in a way, the truth in the form of a lie, right? And sort of William Blake's all over that as well, right? A lot of his poems, which are called Songs of Experience, are really like lies in the form of the truth. You know, when someone says, just face facts, let's be honest about this, human beings are just, you know, aggressive and mean, all that stuff is very much a lie in the form of the truth, right? And that's sort of what scientism is also about, right? It's really a form of religion. You know, it's kind of saying, Tim Morton's made of atoms, for example, and atoms go on longer than Tim Morton, because when you destroy Tim, the atoms are going to stay there. Therefore, atoms are more real than Tim. Therefore, Tim is just a kind of illusion, right? None of this is implied in science, right? Like, in a way, scientists have to take a sort of invisible Hippocratic oath to sort of swear off making ontological statements like that, you know. And this is why I'm teaching this class called English 101, and the title of the class is What is a Fact? And the point is, it's for mostly 99% of the class is science majors. And I'm basically training them like the way you are scientific in a good way, you know, open mind, ready to be wrong, ready to be amazed by the world, mostly encountering the world in the key of wonder and beauty, with a slight but delicious disgust fringe around that you're able to cope with because you're a scientist and you're brave. All that stuff you can also apply to stuff that happens outside of the lab, such as concepts like masculine, feminine, subject, object, subjective, objective, all these things that are in your head, right? Like, so humanities and arts, to that extent, right, is the STEM. And you know this, I mean, I'm very, very strong on this, right? Like, we should be so totally confident and saying this out loud that we are the STEM. Don't say STEAM. Of course, don't say STEAM. It's a horrible thing to say, and it sounds awful, but actually say, no, we're the STEM, right? And in the Middle Ages, they got it right. They didn't call it STEM, they called it trivium. Yeah, trivium means three-legged stool. And it's what all the sciences are sitting on, yeah? Because science is about how to produce facts that are, you know, biology true or physics true or chemistry true, right? Like, a fact is an interpretation of data. You can't look under the hood of the data to see the fact. That's the kind of modern age kind of consensus since about 1750, right? What you do instead is you interpret the data, you create a fact, which is why you can have fake news, but it's also why you can have science, right? Those kind of things are sort of like, you have to have one and the other, yeah, and then you have to be vigilant about the fake news aspect of it. But that means that, you know, you write your little biology essay with your biology facts that you've created based on your interpretation of the data, you send it off to Nature Biology, and the editorial board goes, well, that's pretty much true, even though I don't agree with it, because it logically hangs together, so I'm going to publish your essay in Nature Biology, right? Humanities and arts is about how to have a fact at all, right? Like, given any data whatsoever, right? Like, given this random bunch of squiggles on a page that we might call a poem or not, can you make facts out of it that are facts that other people could share, right? That's the goal, right? And that's, we should be so totally very affirmative about that right now. So in the Middle Ages, you basically, okay, so what do you do first? You study the operating system of meaning called grammar, right? as opposed to doing the writing program, which is sometimes can be about like rearranging the apps on your iPhone rather than creating an app, which is what grammar sort of is, right? Then after that, you do logic, which is how to have meanings that hang together and are coherent and true on their own terms, right? Then you do rhetoric, which is how to convey that to people in a way that doesn't suck for yourself and other people. Then you're ready to make facts in astronomy or theology, because that was considered a science at the time, right? Not in alchemy, because they had their own version of scientism called alchemy, right? So they knew about that too. Yeah, you just have to read Frankenstein to figure that out. Yeah, it's all about a guy who is addicted to this medieval scientism called alchemy, which is why he wants to create this creature. Anyway, the point of this is that I'm determined to make sure that you all understand that humanities and arts are foundational, as we know, right? But you need to know what, like, how to say that in a way that really gets across to people. And I think this kind of gets across to people, right? So when William Blake says, you know, the sun is not a giant copper penny, it's a choir of angels shouting, holy, holy, holy. He's not saying science is bad. He's saying the reductionism that reduces the sun to a burning copper penny isn't science. It's ideology that's part of how we're now going to oppress you, right? Like, oh, there has to be, you have to be selfish because that nets out as selflessness, because I've read the fable of the bees and I'm Adam Smith and I'm going to write this thing that's then going to justify in 200 years all the austerity that they're now going to do again to themselves in Britain because of 2 days of the current prime minister screwing up the economy by saying something. You know, it's sort of like that, right? And there's no reason to sort of buy into it. Yeah. So yeah, the trouble with that kind of austerity is, of course, it's based on a stupid mistake, right? Like I don't remember the name of the Harvard economist who didn't hit return at the right point on their spreadsheet, but basically it's a whole bunch of rubbish that 95% debt means you've got to do austerity all of a sudden, you know, or above 95. I can't remember the exact number, but it's just a bunch of rubbish. But of course, it's a wonderfully good example of a zombie idea that just kind of keeps going, right? And here's another zombie idea that just keeps kind of going, which is that time and space are everything that we already know that we can see on maps and Wikipedia. In other words, they're already measured out for us. In other words, measurement is like a fundamental feature of our universe, and time and space are reduced to the measurement of time and space. And a really elegant definition of colonialism would be being on somebody else's time all the time. You know, that's a basic good definition of oppression. If you're on somebody else's time and space, then basically you're being oppressed, right? Like, imagine, you know, we've got the biggest, most accurate clock in the universe. It's called Stonehenge, and we're the Druids. And by the way, we're going to make you make it. You're our slaves now, and you have to get this stone from Wales, and then you have to build this circle. And it's, you know, it's a clock, right? And then you jump inside the clock, and we'll sacrifice you because we're the Druids and you're the slaves. And right, that's what we're talking about here. You know, whoever has the most accurate clock gets to be in charge for some reason. It's what Blake calls Satan's watch fiends, you know, and he's all about like how to preserve the world from Satan's watch fiends, how to stop reality being reduced to the measurement of reality, because measurement is really just about what you want to do next, right? Like, you know, you want to take over England and destroy a lot of people and turn them into slaves and sacrifice them. You got to create this giant clock, and you got to tell people it's really accurate. You know, you want to go around the Cape of Good Hope and invade the Spice Islands and colonize them and create the first, you know, stock trading company called the East India Company, right? Queen Elizabeth I, 1600. Well, then you need to have all kinds of things like perspective geometry sorted out so you can draw what's around the corner when you go around the Cape of Good Hope. And you need to create instruments like credit that allow you to do that. So you have to measure time in a certain way, right? And then all of a sudden, everyone's on Greenwich Mean Time, you know, all of a sudden, you know, in geological time terms, it's like, it's less than an eyelash flicker, yeah, or an eyebrow flicker if you're Mr. Spock. And it's just like, this is how it works, yeah. And that's why I read this opera, Time, you know, that actually It's impossible to reduce time to the measurement of time, but we keep gaslighting ourselves that we can. And unfortunately, white Western philosophy has gaslit itself for like thousands of years that we can. And so for me, actually, public enemy number one, philosophically speaking, would be what we call the metaphysics of presence, which is based on this idea of measurability as a kind of built-in thing, right? And then public enemy number two would be teleology. Yeah, Aristotle was Alexander the Great's tutor, and Aristotle was all about, you know, Macedonians, because Aristotle was Macedonian, their telos, the point of them is to enslave barbarians, right? Like people who sound like sheep. They go, bar, that's a word, barbarian, you know, incredible speciesism and racism superimposed, which is quite common. And you know, and those guys are for being enslaved. That's their job, you know. So of course he's empowering somebody to do that by doing that, right? And this concept is entirely nothing to do, for example, with evolution, which is beautifully non-teleological. Yeah, DNA mutation is random with respect to current need, right? One of the reasons why to care for the planet is that it's a complete accident. You know, in this Blake book, I'm saying it's an abortion. And that's why one reason why I'm publishing it, because while I was thinking, I'm doing like 3 books, and then the Supreme Court abortion leak happened. And then I thought, oh, I'm definitely putting this to the front, because chapter 2 or something like that is just called abortions. And it's saying abortion is so important that causality itself is abortive in its ontological structure. You know, look at me, evangelicals, I'm in a privileged place of tenure, hurt me instead of these poor primary school teachers. You know, that's actually a tactic that's not going to work at all, is it? But there's some kind of wishful thinking there. And just getting a bit more fierce with the rhetoric, right? Like when I first wrote my ecology books, I was trying to get through the metal detector of, you know, somebody in the early days of eco-criticism reading my book, and I actually predicted who it would be, and it was that guy, Jonathan Bate, if you want to know, how to say, you guys are a bit, you know, not you guys, but the way you talk has racist and misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic implications. So could you maybe talk a bit differently about ecology? Otherwise you're going to miss a spot, and eco-fascism is a thing, you know, and how human beings treat each other is how they treat other life forms, roughly. Because actually speciesism is enabled by patriarchy and, for example, white supremacy. It's enabled by that. It's that way around. The logical structure of it is this: how we treat other life forms is enabled by that, right? So if we really want to be ecological people, people like me should talk a lot about race and gender, and not so much actually about bunny rabbits and dolphins, because if you do that first, it's like you've missed a spot, you know. So I wrote that, but really, really, really quietly. And I still got death threats, actually. I got death threats from some of the old school eco-humanities people, literally. And I had to make police reports and stuff just because I'd said, have you ever considered the possibility of dropping this idea called nature? It's really sucky and bad. It's like I took their toy away. And even though I said it quite quietly, and so my career has basically been getting louder and louder and louder and louder about this thing, you know, in tandem with global warming getting warmer and warmer and warmer and warmer. Although right now, at this moment, I think people like me shouldn't be heating it up too much anymore. I think if I was writing a book like Hyperobjects now, I'd be pretty cross with myself. You know, Hyperobjects was okay in 2013, where it said, let's blow some people's minds and get some humanistic scholars and artists to think about this stuff. And, you know, but now I don't think, you know, we don't need to shock ourselves or upset ourselves one more second. And actually on the side of ideology, I feel, unfortunately, is a lot of how people like me talk, right? You look at page 1 of the newspaper, talking of religion. Page 1 is basically a data dump, you know, which is something that, you know, we don't do to ourselves about other domains of our life, just dump data on ourselves. And it is, in a way, the scientific version of the book of Revelation, right? Like, Kraken comes out of ocean, you know, 1 point something degree something, you know, some kind of statistic that you never heard of, that you can't do anything with, that's just there, like, bleh. You know, it might as well be the Kraken, right? It might as well be the apocalypse on page 1. There's nothing you can do about it, yeah. along with the usually quite offensive, bad thing hurts oppressed people worse. It's just like, wow, really? You have to say again that this hurricane was bad for non-white people? That's kind of like, are you surprised by that? Jesus. Anyway, so that's, page 1, you're stupid because you haven't read the book of Revelation. Then you open to the middle of the newspaper and Eeyore. Let's just call people like me Eeyore for a minute. Eeyore. Eeyore's great, right? I suffer from depression and I'm very out about depression, but and I wake up feeling very upset, I think legitimately about global warming and about my kids. And the thing I think of is crop failure. Like when it's 40 degrees where my mum lives in London, I'm thinking what happens when it's that every day, every week? What happens then? Oh, right. White guys like me have all the fun of what other people have in the world, which is they can't eat. Apparently their house bursting into flame or flooding isn't good enough as a motivator. But how about you're not going to have any food? I think that's a message we should send to people. Anyway, so I wake up thinking about that. But then I get out of bed and I get dressed and I go in the kitchen and I make breakfast for Simon and Claire and I take them to school and I don't sort of go on to Generation Z who know this. They know this. They really know this, right? They know it. We don't have to say to them, that just makes it worse, right? You have to figure out how not to do that, yeah? So how come it's okay for Eeyore to do that to you and me and Generation Z, more like, in the middle of the paper? And right, so in the middle of the paper, there's the sermon, right? Like page 1 is the apocalyptic data dump, and the middle of the paper is the sermon that basically says, you're a bad person. You're an evil, bad person. You're not doing this right. You're not thinking about this right. You're not doing the right things. You should be very, very ashamed and you're very bad, right? Stupid and evil is not a good place from which to launch any kind of progressive politics. I don't know about you, but when I feel stupid and evil, I just want to pull those covers over my head, So unfortunately, people like me might as well be in the Eeyore mode, working for big oil for free. We're basically just disempowering people in the key of being right, which is a really like unfortunate and sinister way of disempowering people. Again, it's sort of like lies in the form of the truth, and how you talk is what you're saying, right? That's what we learn when we do a humanities class, right? It's not some optional extra. It's like, it is what you're saying, right? Like anti-vax people, the way to talk about them is like, yeah, sure, you're talking about freedom in the key of murder-suicide. Right? It's like, okay, freedom, but like in terms of I'm going to infect you and it's okay if I get infected and die, I don't care, I want my freedom, right? So how you talk sort of is what you're saying, and it's the basic lesson of, what we call phenomenology. Yeah, the how is the what, how something happens tells you what it is, right? And that's just basic science, right? Like sodium chloride dissolves in water. That's how sodium chloride dissolves. That's the how of salt. That tells you what it is, right? How something happens tells you what it is. And it kind of gets you out of this whole problem of talking about time in a way that is very recursive and having to do with measurement, right? Like in my area, which is English Lit, we have this problem with rhythm, right? Like, what is rhythm? Well, it's the measurement of the way the poem is paced. Well, it's the measurement of the rhythm. And what is rhythm? It's the measurement of the rhythm. But what is it? But what is it actually? It's you have these thoughts and conversations all the time, in fact, right? I was in this seminar actually in Berlin, and I started thinking about it because it was about sexuality seminar. And for some reason I got thinking about it. So what is rhythm actually? Let's look it up and find out that actually the final syllable of that word comes from a Greek word thumos, yeah, Thumos. And the first syllable of that word comes from the word rain, which means to flow, as in diarrhea, right? Flowing fluids, yeah, body fluids. And thumos means pulsation or palpitation, right? So before rhythm means the measurement of beats in music or a poem, and before it even means the measurement of beats at all, rhythm means the pulsing of the body fluids. That's what it really means, right? Like, if you were to say thumos, you would sort of point here to this part, yeah? And I'm saying palpitating because that's the thing about life, yeah? My daughter has a heart condition, and she had one of those echosonograms, and you could sort of hear how you know, gagung, gagung, gagung is how it sounds from 40,000 feet. But when you zoom in, it's like, even the regular one is a kind of what Nietzsche would say, a rare form of palpitation in a way, right? And this vibrational quality, so where does it come from? Things just kind of quivering all by their little lonesome, you know, that's also life, right? Life as thumos, yeah, as opposed to life as bios, which is a biological concept, yeah, where you get into this conversation about life versus non-life, and, you know, that can be adjudicated in various strongly ideological ways. Or Zoe, right? Like the legal juridical concept of life, like that being there doesn't deserve to live. That one, yeah, is also not a great idea, right? But thumos isn't such a bad idea, because the thing about life being a complete accident, having to do with this thing here, is actually saying something true about our universe, which is that our universe is not a machine. Yeah, our universe is not a machine where there's a cause and an effect and the going like that, like billiard balls. In fact, quantum theory is substantially true as far as we know. And that means that, number one, genuinely new things can happen, right? You can have quantum random numbers. That means you cannot predict the random number. That means they're in the future. That means the future is different from the present. That means the future can be different from the present, which means that genuinely new things can happen, which would be a great thing to say to Generation Z right now. And number two, things move all by themselves, right? I don't know how important this is for you, but really it's very, very important if you want to undo this binary of master versus slave, right? Because masters make things move and slaves do the moving, right? Actually, that's not true about our world, right? Like, things don't need to be mechanically pushed in order to be moving. Things are kind of vibrating all by themselves because they always have their own frequency and amplitude to them, right? Like, there's electrons and there's the Higgs field and there's the weak force and the strong force, and all these things have their own frequency and amplitude, and there's no transparent vanilla frequency or amplitude out there, right? And the basic problem with patriarchy and white supremacy is that it posits the idea of a transparent being. That's the problem with whiteness, is that it's not really about whiteness, it's about transparency, right? Or, as feminism would say in the 1980s, the unmarked gender, right? The transparent one, right? Everybody, according to enlightened philosophy, is a man with a capital M. Some of them are women, right? That sort of idea, right? So the problem with whiteness is that it's that, right? It's the unmarked race, it's this transparent idea, but the universe isn't like that. The universe doesn't have a transparent anything in its body, and this is a very important thing to know, right? And it's particularly important right now, you know. So where are we at? The random contingency of planet Earth's biosphere, right, coupled with the fact that it's alive. And you know how easy it is to decohere quantum states, right? You just have to kind of, sometimes even just observing them, because observe means deflect with some kind of particle, right? Like, you're looking at it with a photon and the photon hits the thing. At that scale, you're adjusting it, right? Even doing that can eliminate the quantum niceness that's happening and turn the thing into a machine. It's very easy to kind of do that, right? And what a shame that could be, yeah. So the randomness of our world, the accidentalness of our world that DNA is saying about our world, yeah, in a way, life is like a huge, big blow up biograph, as it were, of quantum theory, in the same way that the placenta is like a huge, big gynograph of a virus, actually, of a viral protein coat. There's a retrovirus. There's basically a symbiont in the form of viral DNA in your DNA, because you're a mammal, called ERV3, right? Endogenous retrovirus 3. And what it does is it codes for the placenta being really smooth. And the placenta being really smooth repels, you know, what are they called? Germs. They're not called that, are they? But it's, and it also repels white blood cells, right? Because symbiosis, of course, is not a nice, lovely thing where we've all decided to be nice. It includes the uneasiness, right? And there's always a kind of uneasy standoff there going on, right? And but the smoothness, right, which prevents what the mother's body should be doing, which is spontaneously aborting a foreign object, is actually from a virus, right? So we're sitting here talking because a virus in your mum's DNA prevented her from spontaneously aborting you. That's really important, right? So life is a huge big blow up of quantum theory, yeah. And also in this sense, which is that apart from the cloning side of life, right, you've got bacteria that clone themselves, they make copies of themselves, yeah. But then you've also got viruses that don't make copies, they sort of get other cells to make copies of them. And then you've got things like flowers, yeah, you've got sexual reproduction, you've got sexual display. And what in science is called the null hypothesis, aka the one you don't have to prove, it's just default. Okay, this is really amazing to think about, but it's the default hypothesis. And if you want to read more about it, there's this brilliant ornithologist called Richard Prum who wrote a book called The Evolution of Beauty. It's a New York Times bestseller, but I don't think even Richard Prum realizes just how important this is, because what he's saying is the biosphere, the way it looks, right? Like I'm including the bookshelf and the book covers and the Venetian blinds over there and the necklace that I had made, and like everything in the biosphere is a product of queer, unconditional, without a telos, female desire. Everything, the way it looks, yeah. Now that's a good reason to care for the world, right? That it's a complete accident and that it's the result of queer female desire. That's the real reason to look after it, right? You know, that's to me, that's really, really important, you know, as a way to sort of start as a place to kind of ground yourself, to give people something to love and something to kind of get out of bed to do, rather than this talk in terms of efficiency, right? Number, weight, and measure. You only need to bring those out, says the devil in Marriage of Heaven and Hell, in a year of dearth, right? You only need to be careful with your money when you haven't got very much of it. So what does it mean when you're always careful? It means that you're kind of creating the dearth, right? This is why I'm calling this lecture The Rise of Darth Vader, because Darth Vader in this picture is actually this notion of the intrinsic measurability of things and the politics and everything else of efficiency that ends up devolving into, right? Efficiency for its own sake might be the same thing as evil. You know, Agent Cooper's apparently a really nice guy and he's a meditator and everything, but in the third season of Twin Peaks, you learn that he kind of creates the problem that he's trying to solve. And in a way, the reason why he creates the problem is he's trying to be efficient. He's trying to solve it efficiently and he's trying to resolve it efficiently, right? And oil corporations are all about efficiency, right? Because oil is a toxic, precious resource, and efficiency is exactly the wrong metric for understanding a future world not based on oil corporations. The right metric is pleasure. And the right metric for pleasure is that it's not a metric, yeah? It's unconditional. We're not talking about utility here, which is about increasing happiness. Well, there's already a metric. You have less happiness, now you have more happiness. That's sort of like the water slide to hell opens up there. But if pleasure in the end is always in excess of any ability to measure it, because where's that pleasure pain boundary? It depends on what time of day it is, right? And where's that pleasure bliss boundary? You know, like bliss, like too much pleasure or not quite enough pleasure. What we call disgusting, you know, it's in like one day this is disgusting, the next day it isn't, right? And to go back to the action at the National Gallery, of course, what they're doing there is they're playing with that dynamic of the disgust feeling, right? And they're getting this can of tomato soup and they're pouring it over the all over the Van Gogh. So of course, at first you think, if you'd study art, oh, Andy Warhol, right? Pop art, how is it talking to Van Gogh? You know, what's going on there? And then maybe you might also think Brian Eno having a wee-wee in the urinal of Duchamp, you know, and this is what postmodern is. It's peeing in Duchamp's urinal. Thanks for that, Brian. I'll remember that for the future. So is it sort of that, you know? And then I got to thinking about it a little bit more, and I started to realize, you know, actually what this is, I'm gonna have to check my phone to say what it is, because I wrote it down on my phone pretty good, and it's probably not as good the way I'd say it. Senseless destruction of a masterpiece called the biosphere, right? And like you're upset and shocked that we did it to this Van Gogh, but you're doing it every day to the biosphere, you know. So it's actually using the dynamic of Warhol and Eno, right, to talk to that. Now that's brilliant, because it's actually what it's doing there is it's fusing together disgust, which is one reaction to, you know, consumer capitalism, and, you know, just sheer enjoyment of it, which is another reaction to it. And it's fusing them together, right? Like the disgust option, right? Like the whole kind of the Clash, William Wordsworth kind of option, right? Which is like, this is gross. And if I vomit disgustingly enough, other people will notice and they'll think it's gross too. And I call it the skylight. And you can't exit from consumer space through the skylight, because unfortunately performing disgust in an appropriate way is how you perform good taste. So they've already thought about that one. So how about going down into the basement called enjoyment, right? Like, I am a product. I want to be, you know, I'm Andy Warhol, I'm in craft work, you know, I'm John Keats. That was John Keats's tactic, right? Well, you can't get out of the basement either, because there's still a master-slave dynamic there. And it's like, okay, Andy, you want to be in the basement? Well, you are my slave now. How do you feel about that? Oh, you were just kidding, right? So you kind of can't exit that way. So the real exit must be in between, in a place called the living room, right? And what is the living room? It's this weird oscillation between enjoyment and disgust, you know, the one that in literature is called ennui. Yeah, it's brilliant that we invented the chemical in the 1800s, in the mid 1800s, right? And that maps onto being sciencey, or as you might say, the subject position of being a scientist. If you were going to be all Althusser about it, you know, because, you know, there's a biologist on the radio a couple of years ago, and he's talking about this sea lion mother loving on him in the ocean, and he's crying, you know, it's very moving, but beautiful. But the trouble is, the way she was doing it was by feeding him dead penguins, which was disgusting. But because he's a scientist, he's okay with it, right? So he's being disgusted in the key of enjoyment, right? Which is your ennui, right? Like you open up the Fleur du Mal and you get to this poem called Spleen, and it says, I'm all covered in vampires and it's really weird and gross, but I kind of like it. But it's a bit weird that I like it. But it's kind of gross that right? Like it sort of oscillates like that. And then you turn the page and it's like spleen, and there's another poem called Spleen. So the thing keeps you in the spleen kind of washing machine about 5 or 6 times, right? So he's kind of saying something there, and he's saying it over and over and over. So you get all the different shadings of it. And it's like, oh, there's no still point here. The problem is the fixation on, I'm just going to do disgust. I know the magic bullet, one size fits all that, or enjoyment. I know we're all going to do Andy Warhol stuff now. That's the tactic. No, there's got to be this oscillation, which is also called alive, right? It's not just the sciencey thing. It's not just ennui. It's actually the thing called alive, as I was saying, because imagine and in particular, it's the thing called symbiosis. And this is where I'll stop. Imagine you're a single-celled organism and you're plopping through the ocean. Yeah. And then suddenly, boom, because you have a permeable cell wall. And you're like, shit, did I just swallow poison? And you have no idea. And then 100 and whatever million years later, a seminar of plants and animals are going, no, that was an aerobic bacterium. And now actually that single cell evolved into animals because they symbiotically turned into chloroplasts and mitochondria, right? But you can't know in advance, right? You can't know in advance. You know, you cannot build a wall and interrogate people who come through that wall. In biology, that means you're going to die. Okay, that's the end of my thing.
Thank you so much. And I'll give folks a chance to maybe formulate some thoughts and questions for Q&A. Feel free to put them in the chat or let me know. You can unmute to ask your question. And yeah, I'll just say it really was a lot to think about for those in the arts and humanities. You know, the role of misogyny and racism in ecological thought and adhering to binaries, but also, I mean, you said in the past, if we want thought that's different than present, thought must veer towards art. And it really was interesting to hear how it can push back against the directives of efficiency, but also reducing everything to measurement, essentially. So it looks like we do have one question from Brian. In past lectures, you've mentioned the law of the excluded middle and the problem it presents for a truly ecological approach. How do you see the institutionistic, I think I'm saying that right, approach, i.e. the rejection of the law of the excluded middle in relation to this kind of science?
Wow. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So there's this thing, you know, so first of all, we need to talk about logic, right? What is logic? Because the law of the excluded middle is a law of logic invented by Aristotle. Yeah. Now, logic is like folding the laundry, and math is like wearing clothes. And you can wear clothes without folding the laundry, as we all know, but you can't fold the laundry without having clothes. Math is better than logic, and math is different from logic. And in particular, math is different from computation, because math actually means communing with. Math is actually much more like being in a crit or looking at a poem. You know, it's much more like you're on the wall, but you're okay with the wall being opaque, right? And sometimes it becomes transparent, but mostly it's opaque, right? Computation is just the laundry folding method that you figure out. You know, once you figured out, oh my God, I love this shade of orange, right? Now I'm going to figure out a logic to put it in the right place in the laundry drawer, right? So if we don't, the first thing to say is if you don't like the logic, if it's ending up with misogynistic or racist outcomes, you can change it the same way as you change your laundry folding technique. If you don't like where the socks go, you can change it, right? There's nothing set, especially not Aristotle, right, who's from 300 BC, and also especially not the law of non-contradiction from section gamma of the metaphysics, where he basically says, you can't be right and wrong at the same time. What's that all about? You know, but actually you can. And as a consequence of that, he's like, you can't be in the middle. You can't be in between right and wrong. How stupid is that? That's the law of the excluded middle. But you can, because if a fact is an interpretation of data, then suddenly truth is statistical, right? Pfizer vaccine is 95% effective, is better than saying Pfizer vaccine is effective, because if you say that, you can only back that up by the threat of violence. It's called the Middle Ages or the Spanish Inquisition. Statistical truth is much better because it's based on consensus, right? And you can be partly right, half wrong, 50% of the way, 70%, 95% effective, right? This is the world of science here that we're talking about. It's all about the excluded middle. And then intuitionism, I'm very interested in intuitionism, actually. And in fact, Tom Stoppard is also, the Dark Side play is about a girl who is in fact, in the end, diagnosed as an intuitionist. And what does it mean? It sort of kind of means wired into your, it must be, right, if we're going to take science seriously, wired into your biological being are all kinds of juicy, nice things like compassion and being kind and thoughtful, and things that we come from primates, but also from other life forms, and things like art, right, which goes all the way down to iridescent wing cases of beetles. Even in Darwin, it goes down there. Yeah. And in particular, the human version of language and art, which is basically coming from primates, right? Like in groups of over 150, grooming is no longer effective as a means of social bonding. So you eat these weird leaves one day and you get really, really high and you decide to have a rave. And in the middle of this rave, somebody goes, because that's what happens, make some noise, you know, like you do. And that's the beginning of language and ritual, right? Religion and language, that born the same in a non-human being space, right? That's why it feels good and powerful to do it. And on that note, you know, this kind of religion feeling, right? Like God is just out of reach and I can't quite seem to even understand. is a kind of a function of being alive in a biosphere, right? The brain signals are always arriving a little bit late. So this feeling of late then gets reified into subject and object, and also into God and then God turns into an evil psychopath who's mostly white and mostly wants to hurt you, But that doesn't have to be the case. Esoteric religion evolved later to try and fix the problem, right? But it's saying something true about where religion's coming from, right? In the same way that flowers and life are saying something true about evolution and about the universe, even though they came later than plants and the physical universe. So I'm very interested in it. I can't say I'm an expert in how to talk about it though. Intuitionism.
Yeah, thank you. That is definitely, that's something out of reach quality as being an ecological being definitely reminds me of something I was talking to a professor here about, that so much of contemporary artwork has moved from being concerned about aesthetics to ethics, and if that needs to be in opposition and sort of what that means, and do you lose that something out of reach kind of quality? So that's not really a question. It could be, but I also, is there anyone else that wanted to ask a question either in the chat or, okay, we do. Let me see if you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, first of all, hi, and thanks for your talk. It's amazing to be here with you today. I was just wondering, because you also talked about the act with the painting, and I think it's everything around climate and all that stuff has a lot to do with communication. So this act with the painting is also an act of communication. And you said that you wouldn't write your hyperobjects book the same way like you have done, because it causes more anxiety than it helps in a way. And this painting action has caused some disgust, but I think often communicating about climate and all the things also causes anger and resentment. And I was wondering if you have any idea what might be important in day-to-day life to rather cause a good sense of responsibility rather than anger or stuff like that.
100%. The biggest problem on the planet must by definition be, the solving of it must by definition be the most attractive, sexy thing you ever thought of in your life, right? You get out of bed going, wow, I'm going to look after the biosphere today. So how do you motivate that, right? How do you talk to that? You stop it with the factoids. You stop it when you're a journalist, you stop like parroting this thing that you think is science, but is actually mediated by the media into a belief competition, right? Where the scientist basically doesn't even realize the game space they're in, which is a zero-sum game between your belief and my belief. And guess what? Evangelicals already know there's a comet coming to destroy the earth, and they already know the lamestream media won't cover it. But they also know something that we don't know, which is that Jesus loves them anyway. So they're not going to swap their belief, right? Instead, you have to have a talk about, you have to sort of talk to people about what belief is, and you have to model a different kind of belief, right? Because belief might not be this, belief might be this, right? Science belief is actually trusting, as opposed to being right, yeah? And so how do you convince someone like, who lives where I live in Houston, Texas, and worst places, because Houston isn't the worst place in Texas, especially not the place where I live, to give a shit, because we need 7 billion people on side. And in particular, we need American people to model it for Chinese people, don't we? To do this, right? And so what do? I think what you need to do is stop talking about ecological stuff and start talking about something else, like talk about the feeling, right? And the closest I can come to a very general word that would work is the word cool. That's why I created this foundation called the Cool America Foundation. There's an organization called Insulate Britain, and I was thinking, what could the American equivalent be? Oh, Cool America, which has the benefit of being an adjective as well as being a verb, right? Cool America, cool America, cool America. You could say it a million different ways. And if I ever got on the TV, I would say America should be cool. Cool is good, right? Cool is it. And I'm making an ad with the director who made Living in the Future's Past. And basically it's a cowboy saying it's great to be cool, because I think cool is the scissors to the paper of great. But great and cool are both affects. The reason why fascism works is it plugs into the affective mode, aka grabbing people by the P word, right? On the left, we have shouting and being right. How's that been working out? We've got to do the same thing, only 5 times more amazing. Guess what? It's easy to do it because we're on the true side of life, right? We don't have to make shit up, and we actually do care about it, right? And so should it theoretically be easy to do? And so that how to get people into the mode of thinking, this is cool, this is a cool thing, yeah? Luckily, all the Trump voters were in their 20s, roughly, and whatever, in the 1970s. So some of them were getting stoned to stuff like Tom Sawyer by Rush. Like inside all the MAGA stuff is this Rush guy getting baked, right? So you have to talk to the Rush guy, yeah, inside people. And I think that's that person's still there. And, you know, it's great to be cool. And so I'm reverse engineering from if I ever got on Tucker Carlson, right? Like, what's the worst thing that could happen to me? I get on Tucker Carlson. And what would I say? I think I'd say something like, Tucker, why do we alienate people? You know, like half of America doesn't even listen to you or watch you because they're so upset by what you're saying. And some of America doesn't even listen or watch what I do because they're so upset by people like me. So why do we do that to people, Tucker? You know, that would be my stance, right? Like, let's actually inculcate the feeling of having accepted that global warming is really important and is really happening without any global warming anything, right? Because global warming's hot enough, right? That's hot and that's powerful and hot enough to be telling people in very horrible real physical terms what's going on. So as global warming heats up, people like me should be cooling down, right? Which is why I wouldn't be writing hyperobjects anymore. I'd be doing something else. And by that, I don't necessarily mean not being provocative, right? This is what I think is interesting about this piece, right? It's really provocative, you know. I also think that another thing that's important here is that people like me shouldn't just outsource stuff to Generation Z, right? Greta Thunberg, awesome. The optics of Greta Thunberg, oh my God, you know, and it's like, why expect an underage girl to be the spokesbeing for the entire biosphere? That's appalling in lots of different ways. And people like me should be stepping up to the plate, and those people shouldn't have to, for one more second, defend the planet that they live on against the grown-ups, you know. So off the top of my head, those are the tactics.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think we'll have one more question if it, one last short question from Alex, if you want to go ahead and unmute. Thanks.
Am I being received? Good. Yeah, well, I'll sort of honestly springboard off of the last question. Might as well keep the theme consistent, because your discussion of scientism reminded me a lot of a group that I've been sort of right-wing watching since probably 2010, but they were nascent at the time, and they became the intellectual dark web, and they became this kind of swarm of people who were concerned about, you know, wokeness and this, that, and the other thing. And they were like a, you know, I don't know what you'd call it, a catalyst or a generator for a lot of what is now mainstream GOP tactical politics. So like Chris Rufo was kind of the bridge between that, James Lindsay. And so to me, that group is art. Before you mentioned scientism, well, because I consider them fanatics of reason, or fanatics of logic, or fanatics of scientism, that they are an extremist group of being moderate and not outside the norm. And they brainwash people into something that is so supposedly normal and everyday, right? Reason, logic, nature, biology. And, you know, and so my question, just quick, comment, you could comment on whatever you want there, but the question would kind of be loosely, do you think the left broadly construed, or the academic left, like kind of lost or had stolen from them, or maybe never had it, that kind of like gesture towards science, gesture towards nature, as being like, actually egalitarianism probably better fits as a natural human phenomena than, because they always give us the reputation of like making things up. We're making up words, critical race theory and all that nonsense. And constructed, everything's constructed, So anyway, because I've thought about that as a tactic, like trying to say, actually, it's your politics that's being imposed on this earth, not ours. We are just trying to figure this out, or something like that. Sorry if I rambled.
I think what you're saying is a little bit like, should we be studying and talking to science on the left, and is it wrong what we used to say about construction and inventing words? In a way, like how do you get behind that? Yeah, in a way that's not to do with the right. Well, science is about construction. Actually, truth is a construction. The word fact means something that has been made. It's from the Latin word facere, which means to make. Truth is socially constructed is literally what the editorial board of Nature knows, right? Which is that, your article, I don't agree with this idea about peptides, but you're right because it's logically coherent. So I'm going to publish you anyway, and then people are welcome to knock you down, because truth is now based on consensus, because it is a construct. And guess what? We do invent big words like peptides, right? Other people do that. Yeah. So postmodernism was never about there's no truth. It was always about how truth is always guaranteed by some social institution. Yeah. And the problem with the internet is there isn't a top level, meta level arbiter, despite what, and precisely you chose that word meta to make it look like there was, because there can't be some kind of ultimate police officer to police all the things that are going on it. So nobody knows what they're saying and how true or false it could be, but everybody's doing things that look a little bit like an academic circa 1992 pimping their CV, what fun that was. So that's part one, right? But then I think also, let's take a really extreme example, which is Shapiro, who says, facts don't care about your feelings. Well, the phrase facts don't care about your feelings does care about a feeling, right? It's a feeling of contempt.
It is a feeling, yeah.
It's a feeling of contempt. The phrase facts don't care about your feelings is, I am justified in feeling contempt for you. So you have to point out, first of all, that actually they're not outside the system looking in either. They care about their feeling. They just want the feelings to be hate and contempt. And we want the feelings to be solidarity and love.
I think that's a pretty great stopping point. We also had a comment from Brandon in the chat. Maybe there's like a 2-minute way to touch on this because it's a great comment. Brandon just started a book, What Comes After Entanglement, which I'm also very curious about. But it had him curious about the limits of ethics based on relationality, entanglement, and related approaches. What approaches could help animate the non-automatic benefits of relational perspectives, which is actually a question we have to ask.
Do you want me to say a thing? I would just say unconditional, the unconditional quality of the universe as such, the fundamentally mysterious quality of things, which is like baked into things, is one big reason why you just can't treat people as a means to an end without some kind of violence.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for everyone for coming. And we will have recorded this talk as well. But I just want to say thank you to the iEar Presents curators, Kathy High and Brandon Miller, and the rest of my colleagues here at the eArts PhD Colloquium. And so, yeah, thank you again. We'll give you the
It's an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.